A long time ago, I made a video about the greatest duos that never won a championship together, where I talked about some iconic ones like Shaq and Penny, and of course Stockton and Malone. In this video, however, I want to take a look at some famous historic big threes, not duos but trios, who looked like they were on the verge of winning the championship and had all the tools, all the hype, and all the talent to do so. It seriously looked like they could have won the title if a few things fell in their favor. Yet there was always an obstacle here and there that stood in their way and prevented them from winning. Sometimes it wasn't even the fault of the players themselves, but management. Let's take a detailed dive into these 5 big threes and why they never won the championship they lusted for so long.
Wow, what a pass! Wow, 360.
Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, and Shawn Marion. When Steve Nash joined the Phoenix Suns in the summer of 2004, there wasn't as much fanfare as you'd expect. While Nash had been an all-star caliber point guard for the Mavs for many years, the general consensus was, at 30 years old, he already peaked and there wasn't much room for growth in his game. Immediately, however, that thought process got thrown into the gutter.
Marion and Steve does not look tired or heavy-legged here in the first 2 minutes.
Upon his arrival to Phoenix, Nash's skill set and playstyle got unlocked to its maximum potential. The Suns, who sported a plethora of young talent, namely Amari Stoudemire and Shawn Marion, 2 hyper-athletic players who were so versatile and dynamic. They benefited greatly from Nash's court vision. The 3 of them were a match made in heaven, and they catapulted the Suns from a mediocre team into the league's best team, sporting the #1 ranked offense and the #1 highest pace. Unfortunately, this trio's time together was quite short-lived. They were only together for 3 full seasons, but with Amari's ACL injury, they were really only together for 2 seasons. In those 2 seasons, they won 62 and 61 games respectively. But in both years, their hopeful run to the championship got terminated by the San Antonio Spurs, their kryptonite. While the Suns were, without question, the best offensive team in the league, they had a very hard time defending elite teams. And with the game slowing down to a halt in the playoffs, their dominance in transition became less effective, as they weren't as great in running half-court sets. For example, in their 2005 series loss against the Spurs, the Suns allowed the Spurs to score over 100 points in every single game. Back then, that was a lot. In fact, the Spurs did not even average anywhere close to that number of points in the regular season. That was the series where Amari Stoudemire averaged a ridiculous 37 points a game. Yet, he was a traffic cone on defense, allowing way more than that. Years later, he even admitted that Mike D'Antoni, quote, never taught him how to play defense. If you look at the way the Suns were defending, I believe him. With Stoudemire being out for most of the 2005-06 season, the Suns still managed a successful year under the leadership of Nash and Marion, reaching the conference finals again. But it was the 2006-07 season when they arguably had the best shot at winning a championship, ever. With the Mavs getting knocked out early by the 8th-seeded Warriors, and the East was basically as weak as it's ever been, the Suns only had one obstacle in their way: their arch-nemesis, the Spurs. This time, with a healthy Stoudemire and the addition of more defensive-minded players like Raja Bell and Kurt Thomas, this was their opportunity to beat them and win it all. While the 2 teams faced off in a mere second-round matchup, in hindsight, this series was the real finals. Unlike their previous matchup, the Suns were now a much more rugged team, much better defensively and way more physical. Unfortunately, a single incident became the turning point of the series.
And here is Nash being chased. And oh my God! That's Horry sent Nash flying, and Bell goes at Horry.
Not only was this an absolutely egregious play by Robert Horry, but both Stoudemire and Boris Diaw got suspended for coming out of the bench area. I mean, they didn't even do anything. They didn't escalate anything, yet the NBA rule stated that bench players cannot leave the area when there's a fight on the court. I mean, it wasn't much of a fight though. As a result, they were both suspended for the pivotal Game 5, a very controversial decision that basically lost them the series. Also, years later, this series became the center of scrutiny. When former referee Tim Donaghy got arrested for a gambling scandal, there was a list of certain games and series where he admitted were fixed, with this '07 series between the Suns and Spurs being on that list. Basically, in addition to the suspensions, the Suns were playing against the refs as well, so that was certainly another obstacle in their way. With the series tied at 2 games apiece, Game 5 was arguably the most important game in the history of the franchise, Game 5 on the Suns' home court. But without Stoudemire or Diaw, the Suns only mustered up 85 points, and narrowly lost the game. Now down 3 games to 2, with Game 6 on the Spurs' home court, they finished up their business and won the series 4 games to 2, eventually trouncing the Jazz and the Cavs en route to the championship. Had this suspension not happened, there was a real chance it could have been the Suns holding up that trophy. Had the Suns got past the Spurs, they definitely would have won the title that year. They were way better than the Jazz or Cavs. Ultimately, this loss encouraged Steve Kerr and the Suns front office to shake up their roster, trading away Shawn Marion to Miami for an aging Shaquille O'Neal. It was quite a surprising trade considering how much Marion provided for the team, filling in so many holes, doing all the dirty work and defending anyone he was asked. He was the perfect fit on this team. With his departure, this trio only played 2 full seasons together. Zach Randolph, Marc Gasol, and Mike Conley. The Western Conference throughout the 2010s, and heck even until now, it's always been an absolute bloodbath. Apart from the usual contenders and star-studded rosters, the Grizzlies were considered a, quote, dark horse contender for all those years, basically implying they were a threat to knock out any team in the league, but they didn't get much recognition, and there were plenty of flaws with their roster that made folks have doubts they could win consistently. From 2011 until 2015, the Grizzlies were a force to be reckoned with, and it started when they snuck into the playoffs as the 8th seed and shockingly upset the heavily favored San Antonio Spurs.
From getting the rebound and then once again takes it to his body, the ability to finish in the paint area. Total domination.
That series became known as the moment Zach Randolph elevated his name onto the global stage, but also the moment when the Grizzlies made the world know they have arrived. After years upon years of rebuilding in the post-Pau Gasol era, the Grizzlies compiled a competitive squad built on the foundation of toughness and grit. The so-called grit and grind Grizzlies became a popular team to root for. Not just for their demeanor, but the way they played basketball was just completely different than any other team in the league. Despite competing for half a decade, the Grizzlies always had a similar problem that they never fixed. The slow-paced over-reliance on their bigs, combined with inconsistent jump shooters and not enough shot creators, the Grizzlies faltered against teams that were simply much better at generating better shots. The Grizzlies relied on their bigs to establish a presence in the paint. In fact, they were among the top 5 in points in the paint for several seasons. But they were also dead last in 3-point attempts for several seasons, attempting only like 11 to 14 threes per game in those years. You might think that's low now, but even back then that was extremely low, about half as much as the higher volume 3-point shooting teams. That's why their offense was subject to a ton of spacing issues. In the playoffs, they were fortunate enough to reach the conference finals once, but their flaws, in particular, their lack of a dynamic offense, came back to bite them. The Grizzlies became known for having random stretches of complete stagnation, and their game plan of relying on Randolph to create all of their shots it became predictable, and thus fallible.
Allen drives again, blocked from behind, Leonard. Allen misses the layup, Randolph's tip won't go, gets it back again.
The 2015 playoff series between the Grizzlies and Warriors became the best representation of new era versus old era. The Grizzlies were still playing with their antiquated playstyle, while the Warriors catapulted themselves into the NBA's newest dynasty by creating an offense that emphasized shooting, spacing, and versatility, all of which the Grizzlies struggled to comprehend for so many years. With that loss to the new upstart Golden State Warriors, it basically ended this era of Grizzlies basketball. Regardless, the trio of Conley, Gasol, and Randolph became unequivocally the best big three in the history of the Grizzlies franchise, and one of the most notable ones from that decade of the NBA. just because of how different they played compared to the rest of the league. Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. What's left to be said that hasn't already been said? 2012, the youngest team in NBA history to reach the finals, on the backs of their 23 and 22-year-old superstars. Well, I guess Harden was not yet a superstar. While they were clearly too young and outmatched against the Miami Heat, Sam Presti made the devastating decision to let Harden walk. Well, they did get something back in return, namely Steven Adams, who became an instrumental piece for the team. Still, to miss out on having 3 rising superstars for their entire primes, all of whom became MVP caliber players, that's hard to swallow. Initially, Harden's departure did not stop OKC from having success. They still made several trips to the Western Conference Finals. And there were some years, specifically in 2014 and 2016, where they were so close to reaching the finals again, but came up just short. I'd imagine if Harden was there, they could have squeezed in a title or two, or at least another finals appearance or two. But on the other hand, perhaps if Harden never left OKC, he wouldn't have developed into the player he ultimately became. To have the opportunity to lead his own team, his own franchise, and take them as far as he can go, it was too much to pass up. I was a bit hesitant on putting this trio in the video because they're more of a what-if scenario. In hindsight, the 3 young studs have yet to become the MVPs they'd eventually become, and we never saw how they'd play together at their absolute peak. But there's no question they would have had a great chance to win it all. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan.
Just doing a great job. Here comes Paul. He's got Blake. Slam dunk.
When Chris Paul arrived to the Clippers in the summer of 2011, I like to compare it to when Steve Nash arrived to Phoenix in 2004. They had the young talents, they had athletic bigs, they had players who'd benefit greatly from an elite playmaker, just like the Suns. But for the Clippers, they've rarely seen prolonged success since the inception of this organization. The Chris Paul era ignited the greatest era in the history of their organization, as the Clippers had 5 straight seasons of winning 50-plus games. In fact, before this, they never even had a single season where they won 50 games. Their previous highest was a pitiful 49 wins, and that was when they were in Buffalo. So I don't even think that counts. However, with great expectations came a great amount of criticism and exposure. Like the Grizzlies of that same era, the Clippers were also seen as dark horse contenders, but maybe a bit more so than Memphis, simply due to being in the spotlight, with one of the best point guards in history, combined with the athletic marvel that is Blake Griffin and the high-flying Jordan. Lob City established a foothold in Los Angeles at a time when the Lakers were struggling to even make the playoffs. Instead, people tuned in to watch this exciting Clippers team, and as they got better and better, the expectations got higher and higher. Before winning a championship, they still needed to break through the first barrier, reaching the conference finals, which was an obstacle in itself. The Clippers had so many chances to do it, namely in 2014 and 2015, where they had a very good chance of making it deep. 2014, you remember this game? The Clippers had it in the bag, until they blew it in the last minute.
17.8 to the hole. Paul had it knocked away by referee. Down to 2. Trying to get it down low, and Ibaka took it away.
OKC escaped with the series. Then in 2015, they secured a 3-1 series lead against the Houston Rockets. While this matchup was considered quite an even matchup between 2 powerhouse teams, losing 3 games in a row and blowing the lead was a catastrophe. I guess that's what Doc Rivers is known for, but still. The most devastating sequence of events came in Game 6. The Rockets came back from a 19-point deficit in the 4th quarter to win the game and tie the series 3 games apiece. Before heading back to Houston for Game 7, they managed to do this with James Harden on the bench, and all of the Clippers' big 3 was on the court, useless as they watched their championship hopes fade away yet again. This series was the one where the whole NBA world decided, okay, the Clippers curse is real. They're just chokers. Chris Paul choked, Blake Griffin choked, Jordan can't hit a damn free throw. At this moment, there was this stark realization that as talented and as well built as this team is, They just don't have it. They don't have the mentality or motivation to win the title. Not to mention all of the untimely injuries that fell upon Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. It seemed like they'd always get injured when the playoffs began, which severely hindered their window for contending. During that era, the Clippers were deemed as the most likely team to put up a fight against the Golden State Warriors, yet they never got far enough in the playoffs to actually face them, always getting eliminated in the second round. Larry Nance, Brad Daugherty, and Mark Price. If there was one team that got completely overshadowed by Michael Jordan's arrival to Chicago, it has to be the Cleveland Cavaliers. You've all seen his iconic game winner, his last-second buzzer-beating shot that knocked out the Cavs in the first round in 1989. But did you know from 1988 to 1994, the Cavs got eliminated by the Bulls 5 times in the playoffs, 5 times out of those 7 years. Led by their big three of Nance, Daugherty, and Price, they've become the most underrated trio in history, simply because they met an even greater force. For example, in the 1988-89 season, they recorded the highest net rating in the entire league. The three of them each made several appearances in the All-Star team throughout that time period, and despite their unfortunate luck with injuries, their resilient big three returned to the playoffs and continued to face the Bulls year after year, losing year after year. Apparently, it was that Cavs team that popularized the term Big Three. Before that, the media didn't use that term much, if at all. And as a team with 3 All-Stars who complemented each other very nicely, they were simply a victim of the Chicago Bulls. It's kinda sad. They were always under the shadow of the great MJ, who basically used them as a punching bag for his whole career. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 5 of the biggest big threes to have never won a championship. Which one of these 5 trios do you think had the best shot of winning it? And which year in particular, if only a few things had gone their way? Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed the video and let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.